What I would like to teach you today is the idea of this lethargic malaise that's coming over so many people's minds, their senses, and their hearts. First, it's coming over their minds in the fact that there is no real clarity for most people, since most are not changing their locations, they're not changing their schedule. They can remain indoors. The mind is not encountering new conversations or new experiences. It can create a certain dullness of the mind. Secondly, I'm noticing that people are feeling very clearly overstimulated or oversensitized to their senses. For many, I imagine, you are tired of the screen. It's actually just numbing you. And maybe that's a grace that you will come out of this experience is enough television and enough iPads. Only use it when necessary. But there are also those that are running more to food or screaming and impatience. And those whose senses are so overwhelming that it's leading them down the path of impurity and improper use of the dignity of their bodies. It's important during this time to be aware of your body, to be aware of the false needs of your body, and also to be aware that the more you care for your body in a creature comfort way, the hungrier it becomes. It becomes like a spoiled baby, constantly wanting to be held, fed, nursed, having oil placed on it. And this body is the very body that St. Paul says is in battle with the Spirit, the very body that seeks to control the Spirit, that anima, that movement of your soul that rises above the day-to-day experiences. And the other thing I'm noticing is just lethargic emotion in the heart. Everything's quasi becoming lukewarm. Nothing has a real fire to it. Work has become burdensome because you don't escape it. The free time for most has just become an opportunity for just sort of wasting it away. It's not seen as a gift. All of this is to bring you to the idea of the book that I read called The Noonday Devil. Some of you are familiar with this. And in this book, the author writes very beautiful that it's when the human heart becomes just sort of stagnant. It's just sort of this perpetual lack of care. I get through the day, I have nothing to look forward to. And thus, in effect, I become very burdened. Father Nault writes beautifully, this is the way you can begin to discern, and he calls it the demon of Achadia. First, he says there's a certain interior instability. You're subject very much to the emotions, and the emotions are just kind of frizzled or frazzled or very, very limited, paradoxically, even though they're very much moving in the life of a person. This emotional instability becomes an excuse for their own evocative emotions. So it gives them permission to hide or to be impatient. Examine your heart if you have this experience of just this emotional instability that you're feeding. If you don't address it, folks, it's eventually going to, in effect, create sadness. Secondly, there becomes this, he writes, this exaggeration of taking care of one's health. In the context of this virus, I understand great concern. But the end of life is not a healthy body. The end of life is not to say, boy, I never let my body get out of shape. That can be vanity. But do you have such an over-exaggerated concern for your health that it prevents you from trusting and believing and surrendering to God? We simply just can't sort of hole up in our homes watching those who violate social distancing, or even watching those television shows or those snippets, and all it talks about is violence and instability. And I want you to examine, are you too consumed with your health? Thirdly, Father Nault says that it creates an aversion to manual labor. Are some of you seeing these things that need to be done and you're just avoiding it? The weeds that need to be pulled, what for? Nobody's walking in the neighborhood. The laundry, the little things that you need to do. And maybe you came out of the box, so to speak, at the beginning in pretty good shape, and you've cleaned up things, and you have actually thrown away the things that you don't need, that are no good, and you've cleaned out your closets. But do you find yourself averting from things that God is asking you to do? And then in effect, I've seen that those things become a place of accusation. So if you don't pull those weeds, they just sort of mock you. Sometimes you just got to do it. Fourthly, he says there's no rule. There's no rule to your day. He's using this for the community. But are you just sort of letting your day have no pattern to it? You don't get up at the heroic moment. You don't make the morning offering. Around noon, you don't do the Angelus. Your rosary, even though you have significantly more time, you don't really do it. Although you've promised God if you had more time, you do more. This, honestly, in not observing the rule that is essential, that is part of your vocation, creates really a lack of discernment. You just get blown emotionally. You get blown frivolously. And then he says that it creates a general discouragement. Like, I think many people want to come out of the virus, but they don't know what it's going to be like. And so the virus then accuses them all the more. It's like, okay, you've got through the virus, but you're back to square one. People aren't back to the way it was. They're not back to the church or school, or they're not back to work. And it creates, as you may see in your heart, this discouragement. Some of those are places of confession, folks. Some of those you fed that sinful pattern. And so I would like you to examine your conscience on that. We shouldn't be surprised that if I keep feeding my emotions, if I become soft, contrary to sainthood, but that just sort of that marshmallow emotion. In effect, what happens is that we become oversensitive and we become self-seeking when we come out of the quarantine. St. Ignatius of Loyola has these rules of discernment that I think that are quite appropriate during this time, because he's allowed us to really understand how to discern. The theme of these talks are rooted in the idea of discerning God's presence during this virus. I want you to recognize that your thoughts and affections that are welling up in you are very important to sort of trim off the fat and get rid of the sort of non-feeling emotions and get to the core. In other words, I'm seeing a numbness. It's almost like a tree that's producing no fruit. Even though it has branches, there's nothing coming. And I wonder if there's certain areas of your mind and your heart, your emotions, that are just becoming relatively just sort of non-fruit bearing. But they're part of your emotion and your mind, so you let them remain. I'm actually, during these talks, I'm asking you to cut those things away, to realize, wait a second, you can't just go through these days always tired, emotionally, discouraged-wise, physically. And so Ignatius is inviting us, I believe, to discern in the bigger context thoughts, feelings, and even desires. We should begin to sense how God wants to console us, how God wants to bring us a certain sense of contentment, but not in the context of simply just, thank God I'm not sick. That's not contentment. That's not peace. That's just avoidance. I'm talking about the real inner freedom that the Lord gives to each one of us. And so St. Ignatius outlines these 3 steps that I think are incredibly pinpoint during this time. First, to become aware. Become aware of your thoughts, feelings, and desires, your emotions. How are you feeling? What is happening within you? Is there a feeling of fear or dread or doubt? Drill down into that. Where is that coming from? What is that place? It's not enough simply to say, yeah, I'm struggling with this. That's not enough. This time of our church are resurrecting old demons of accusation, and they're appearing in this pandemic fog. And those voices are mocking so many people. And in effect, what they're trying to do is bring people into the fog and thus cause this perpetual doubt. Where are you, God? Where are you? So you have to become aware. Even in my own life, I've seen the necessity of this. We cannot ride the roller coaster of emotions of people around us. That's not the purpose of our Christian life. Remain consistent, focused, rise above that haze that are typically crippling people, and it will all depend on their spiritual life. Those without will become subject to the emotional roller coaster. Those with the spiritual life will continue stable, unrelenting, moving forward, just like it's day 1 of the pandemic, for the greater glory of God. Number 2, you have to understand. Are these new emotions, or are they things you've always run from? This is so profound. That things from the past are coming forward, or even recent past, or even relationship, and they're coming up, and instead of just simply confessing them away, God's inviting you to understand. Where do they come from? Have you just chosen to be busy or in avoidance so that you don't have to address these things that are evident within you? And so the quarantine in the isolation of homes, and so many people have not always had the best, most productive experience, life-giving experiences in homes. How beautiful God is to let you confront this pain in the home. The more painful it is, if you renounce the lie of the evil one that's mocking you, you will experience a healing. But you must be present. You must do it with Our Lady. You cannot heal on your own. Only Our Lady will bring you to that healing. So if you are being mocked because of a trauma or pain or something in your formation, in your home, or if there was something where you felt boxed in, just like the quarantine emotionally, not even in a physical location, I believe that what God is offering us is a place to understand more profoundly the deeper experience of the heart. Are you even seeking to understand? The spouse that hides all the time during confrontations now has nowhere to hide. And so basically he can hide in plain view. And you can't even touch him or communicate. And lastly, we have to take action to receive or reject them. So clearly is St. Ignatius on target when he says that we must take action, renounce them, or accept them. Even during this time in my own life, in the rectory, I have seen little things that remind me in a healthy or unhealthy way of experiences that I thought I had, quote unquote, healed from, or that I thought I had brought to the Lord, and He's bringing them in a deeper, more profound manner. And in effect, I'm able to witness to people that are coming to me with these experiences. I believe that's one of the reasons why the Lord has put in my heart to be very present to people during this time of the quarantine, to provide meals spiritually so that they don't get that sense of abandonment. So coming from an experience of that in my own life, I'm able to understand people's sense of feeling abandoned. And then from there, falling into a life of sadness or loneliness. That's discernment. Rule 1 of St. Ignatius is for those people that are moving from mortal sin to mortal sin. I guess I would propose to you, what is the direction of your life? Are you falling back into sins? Are you giving up? Are you just finding yourself uniquely trapped again? The psychological reality that is affecting many of us is that psychological oppression that's trying to cripple us and saying, go back to the patterns of sin, just like you did as a teenager, a young person. Those sinful patterns, because things were not at peace, and so you can go backwards. But here's my challenge. I think some are now making the choice for these sins, as opposed to impulsively being dragged into them like the past. If you know better, then fight the fight. If you know that that television show is going to trigger something in you, then don't watch it. And don't be surprised that it causes you to fall. The goal of the enemy is to pull you away from God, to pull you into a lethargic, lifeless emotion. What are the ordinary ways in which the evil one pulls you down? What are the ordinary times that he mocks you or isolates you? What is the typical window that he breaks into your emotions through? Is it a screaming child? Is it a thankless spouse? Is it something that's on the television that seems like those in leadership are just inactive and it reminds you of something in your own life? As if somebody doesn't care for you or love you or is willing to sacrifice for you. Which direction are you moving, folks? My two take-homes for you. First, I would like you to examine, based on the book of Father Nault, are you in sort of a spiritual lukewarmness and achadia? And are you doing what you can to get out of it? Does it even worry you or bother you? Second, do you recognize the direction of which you're going and that there may be this oppression that's slowing you down and preventing you from cutting the dry wood, the non-fruit-bearing wood of the tree, and just remaining sort of numb? But it's the paradox. I'm numb, but I'm over-emotional, over-stimulated, over-needy, but I'm numb. God does not create us like that. We become like that in an effort to avoid the deeper reality of my heart. As I close adoration, a benediction now, I invite you to join me tomorrow, where I will expose the Blessed Sacrament and talk about the second rule of St. Ignatius. Let us seek to be holy today. It's not enough simply to listen to the talk. You must drill down deeper and understand more profoundly what the Spirit is saying in you.